This episode may contain language or discussions that may be offensive or triggering. Refer to the episode summary for details. Welcome to She.confidential podcast. I am Charlene Ketchum, and today I am chatting with Miss Sana Colter, and I am so excited and had a total fangirl moment because I have been following her Black Classics You Should Know in the First Few Notes Instagram series since last summer. I've been sending the videos to my friends, and we've been having a little contest on who actually recognized the songs in the first few notes. I win most of the time. So if you're not following her on Instagram, definitely you should be. And by the end of this conversation, you'll definitely want to be because she is just amazing. And so Sana is a musician, she's a composer, she's an educator, and advocate for the arts. She is doing it all. She is a founder and president of the organization Create, which stands for Cultural Rhythm Expressing Art to Empower. And today we're going to talk about value of art programs in schools and in the lives of young people. We'll talk about the lack of representation of Black and other minorities in the professional performing world. We're going to identify some ways that you can support professional musicians and music programs. And we'll also talk about some of the services and other things that Sana has going on these days. So before we jump in, again, hi and thank you.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So how did you get started?
Well, my musical story dates back to when I was in fourth grade. There was a time when I would walk around in the church, and me and my mom used to go to church every Sunday. And one thing that I loved about my church was the music. It was like we were playing everything from things in the book all the way to things I would hear on the radio. And there were so many diverse musicians that would always come to my church. And I used to run up and down the pew asking everybody, who knows how to play piano? Can anybody please teach me something? And there was one day these two guys came up to me and they were like, yeah, we can teach you something. And the song was simple. It was Mary Had a Little Lamb. And one of them got on the drums. The other one, they made a whole jam session out of it. And for me as a kid, it was such a big moment. Like this was my first time really creating music and being in a musical scene. And from there, shortly after, I received a paper from my school that had asked what instrument did we want to play. And I had picked the flute, and my mom and I did not know this once I had chose the flute, but my mom used to play flute when she was in high school. So she was my first music teacher and taught me how to play my first note and everything. And eventually I started to want to know more about how to play piano. And I was playing both piano and flute around the same time. And, my mom was a single mother. She didn't have enough money to go really get the music lessons at all these places. So she would ask around, and she really made it possible. And that's one thing I always say to parents of young musicians is, it will be a challenge at times because the finances, it definitely will start to hit as your child advances in whatever they do. And my mom is a prime example of that. And we had a conversation with my music teacher at school, and she was saying, I totally understand your situation. You can come in right after school. I'll give you lessons. And from there, that was the jump start into my career. And from there, I had continued on all throughout middle school, got to high school. And around high school is around the time when people kind of get to high school and they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to be in the band anymore. Like it was all of a sudden this not really so cool thing, but I still loved music. I wanted to continue on. And right before my freshman year, my middle school band teacher, who I often give a lot of love to because he is a Black man, he's a trumpet player, and he always made sure that the music we learned was so diverse, and there were a ton of Black artists and composers that were involved in our conversations. So I'm so thankful to have him to always provide examples of these people out there that I can look up to as idols in the music scene. And he was saying, you really should start auditioning for things. Like you should go for the county bands and things that were happening around my area. And I went to all the auditions and I was not getting into any of them. And I would go through the audition process and it was slightly uncomfortable, coming into this space where you're the only Black person that's in this humongous audition room full of all these kids who go to these high schools where their music programming is, top notch. And I would come into this space feeling very intimidated, not really knowing how to have conversations with these people that were in my environment, just feeling like I was so out there and no one could relate to me in a sense. And it took,
Yeah.
that was the beginning of like my audition process, how to audition, which is a whole mental thing in itself. And finally, I was sitting in my mom's car. I was like, Mom, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Like, it's upsetting me so much, going into these spaces and being so uncomfortable. And she would tell me, keep going, keep going. You know, you love this thing, keep going and keep representing. And finally, one of the last auditions I had taken towards the end of my eighth grade was for the Juilliard's Music Advancement Program. And this was probably one of the biggest auditions that I had thus far. And I remember walking into that audition room and absolutely killing it. And it was unlike any prior experience I ever had. I just really came in there and showed out. And I got in, and I went through that program for 3 years. And I actually had graduated high school and that program because I was attending both at the same time. I graduated them both early because I wanted to go to college early, and I wanted to really be in a music program and get that training. And then I went to Mason Grove School of the Arts in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and graduated with a bachelor's in music performance and music technology.
That is just so amazing. Oh my gosh. Like there's so much to be grateful for and inspired by in your testimony because you had amazing teachers, and I love that you were exposed to amazing like black teachers because
Yes.
there's been a thing on Facebook going around saying like what grade were you in when the first time you had a black male
Wow.
teacher, because that's not
Yeah.
common for a lot of people. And the fact that you had that, especially in your music program, is huge.
Mm-hmm. I definitely, when I think about that question, I think the first black male teacher I had was in fifth grade, and he was my math teacher. And he had such a different dynamic than so many of my other teachers. He
Mhm.
honestly was just so different. I was in a classroom that was predominantly black, and we're all looking at this teacher, and we had so much respect for him. And he just spoke to us in a different way because he knew our position in the school, he knew our position in the world.
Mhm.
He looked at us differently as students. And I definitely appreciated him as much as I appreciated my music teacher. Just the fact that already black musicians, it's such a low percentage of us in the actual industry on the stages, that are actually on the
Mhm.
pamphlets and flyers that everybody sees when they think of what the word orchestra means and what they think the word
Yeah.
musician means. So to have him as my example every time I walked in there, I knew there were no limits to what I could be just because of this color of my skin.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I appreciate that you are transparent about like it's a financial hurdle for a lot of
Hmm.
people. And I would guess that that's one of the main barriers as to why we are so underrepresented.
I absolutely think so. It's a lot, and that's of course something more that you see once you get to like the college level and high school level. You're really seeing, how much music expenses can add up over time, especially if you want lessons on the side that are not offered through your school system. And in my case, to get the training that I knew that I would need for to get into college and all these other programs, I knew that I needed some additional training in that sense. In my case, it was a little bit different. The Juilliard Music Advancement Program, they catered more to non-white musicians and all the younger kids. They wanted to have a place, for them to really learn and be on the same level as all these other school systems that might have the most intricate training. But in terms of finances, that's definitely one thing with music lessons, the expenses of an instrument in itself. I often think of the
Mhm.
school systems. Music is usually the first thing to go. And this is also a conversation about finances for these school systems. It's like, okay, the budget's getting kind of low. Let's just cut the music program and cut the art studio, and anything
Mhm.
creative just goes right out the window. But the funding continues to still go into sports and things like that. So that's definitely a conversation to be had with the school systems and the way that they approach their budgets and the way that they ask for funding, whether it be from alumni of the school system or nearby musicians. Finances is definitely a heavy conversation in music. Hmm.
Absolutely. And it's really problematic when we look at there's research out there that demonstrates that arts programs actually helps improve
Hmm.
academics. It helps with behavioral concerns, it helps with stress management, and we need those creative activities. Like that helps develop an important part of our brain function. And there's research out there to support that. And so it's so disappointing because I remember when I was in grade school, and it's we had some kind of enrichment class, and I call those, like, those are the true enrichment classes. We had one or two every day. I think we probably had two every
Mm,
day, because we had choir, we had band, we had art
wow.
class, and we had gym. And those weren't separate things that you had. I think now they get one of those classes per
Yeah, I think
term or
so too.
something. And we went every week. We went to several of those
Right.
classes. And we also had a theater program. And it was just, those were my favorite
Hmm.
classes. And they all kind of went hand in hand, because I was really never been good in math, but I really loved the reading classes, and I loved to get in the stories. And I felt like the theater classes and even like choir, I never tried to play an instrument, but even in choir class, I felt like I could
Yeah.
pretend and kind of transport myself through these other activities. And in art class, I've never been like good with my hands in that way, but just to be able to create something was a good
Yeah.
outlet for my energy, and then even just
Mm,
emotionally. And so it's so disappointing to see that those are the first things that are on the chopping block, when if we want kids to succeed, we might want to nurture these activities that we know are positive outlets for them, especially these days.
definitely. And I agree with music being something that's therapeutic for me. Even before I knew what therapy meant, I would find myself after a long day of school, whatever a long day of school was, when you're in middle school,
Mhm.
but I would go right to the piano as soon as I came in the door. And no one ever had to tell me, you need to practice, you need to do this, because I always just use life as my motivation to want to sit there. And what's crazy is the kids want it. It's like it's something that does help them excel, but it's also something that they get really excited about. Like seeing kids learn how to play instruments, they are through the roof with excitement. And I just feel like we need to offer so much more of that to them. I definitely remember, I think this was my last year of high school. They had a program where you didn't have to go to class, but you could do some sort of service activity outside, out in the community. And I had went to my middle school. I went right to the band program that
Mhm.
had nurtured me and got me to the point that I was. And I was able to sit there, see how the music classes were going, talk to some students. And around my last few days, because this was around the point when they had to decide if they were going to play music going into high school or not. And I heard such interesting conversations between both the students and the parents in terms of how they felt about continuing on with music. And it's so funny, like a lot of the parents would say stuff like, well, I want them to get interested in something that's like a real job or a real career. And that's always the term that parents use, that I hear a lot when talking about music as a career and something that you should continue. And I heard a lot of the difficulties with finances and not knowing how much things will cost moving forward. From the students' perspective, in their minds, they were just like, I actually love band. It's really fun, but my mom really doesn't want me to continue, or my dad really doesn't want me to continue. So it's interesting also from the parental perspective. I feel like a lot of education needs to go into the families about all the different things. It's not just you can be a musician, you can be an arranger, you can be a composer, you can be a conductor. There's so many careers within the arts that I feel like need to be talked about more, but because of lack of representation, because of lack of talking about the arts as careers, I feel like not as many people know all the things that you can be in a creative career.
Yeah. And you're educating me as well, because I hadn't, even though I love music, even though I've never played anything. And so I've gone to the symphony and things. And so it's like I see all those people on stage, but I've actually never thought about, wow, those are careers. And so whenever I hear someone say that they're going to be a musician, I just think about the people who are playing. I don't think about all those other roles. And being honest, it is a little scary when you think about, okay, is this person going to be able to have a viable career and actually, generate an income and be happy and be able to live on what they're doing. And I think you're absolutely right. We're just not educated about the possibilities. And the other thing, and this just came with life experience, what I have learned is if you pursue what you're passionate about, you'll figure out how to make
Oh yeah.
money.
Mm-hmm.
It just go hand in
Mm-hmm.
hand.
That's a big one. That's a really big, and I relate to that. I think back to seeing family members over the years who were doing something for work that they absolutely hated. And, it's like maybe they were making enough money to get by, but it was so much unhappiness in that. It was so much stress in that. And I knew from a young age, I was like, whatever I do, I just want to be happy. And I know that if I'm
Yes.
happy, I will wake up every morning knowing that this is something that I'm going to continue working for. And it's true that once you really put your all into it and you're giving all your energy and excitement and happiness towards this thing, things seem to come in return in a very good kind of way, also financially as well. But you start to meet people within your field that are just like you and make those connections and network. It gets so exciting when you're really doing something you're passionate about.
Yeah. And so how do people get to that point? Because they first have to develop their skill enough to know that, you know what, I can get into one of these great programs, or I can actually make money. Someone will actually pay
Mhm.
me to do this. How do they even get to that point when it can be so expensive? Are there some money savings tips? Like what are some creative things that parents or young musicians, aspiring musicians can do to get those lessons or even get the instruments like you mentioned? Those can be very expensive.
Absolutely. You have to be, from my experience, you have to be very transparent about what your situation is, throw it out there. I know at my school, around middle school, we had, and high school, we had the instruments that were like the rental instruments. So when you went to band class, you didn't have to have your own instrument, but they were there for you to use. And over time, you might realize, like, oh, I'm really interested in actually owning my own. And I would definitely, of
Mhm.
course, recommend the budgeting, the saving, of course, all of that. Me and my mom, we were very close with all the music stores that were in the area that we would often go to and see what they had for sale, see if anybody was renting anything out, and just have that conversation. This is the financial situation that I'm in right now, but I love this instrument. I practice it every single day. This is something I want to own someday. And to be very transparent about my own situation, I did not own officially my own instrument until last year. I had been renting instruments all the way through middle school, high school, college, and a way was always found. But I knew that someday I wanted to own this instrument. So over time, I would continuously save and save and save until I was at that point. But then there's also conversation around lessons, affording for lessons. My church was a place where I got so much musical guidance and came across so many musicians unexpectedly within my own religious community. And those people would always be so open and willing to give a lesson here and there, talk to me about music, talk to me about music business, which is a whole other conversation
Mhm.
because even when you're a musician, something that I often realized in my classes, I'm like, okay, they teach us how to be a good musician, but don't really teach us how to navigate the business that we actually need to do because we're not just musicians, but we're also, in a sense, entrepreneurs because we're finding
Yes.
our own performance opportunities, we're setting our rates for things. The business aspect was something I really had to take seriously and learn over time. But I definitely would recommend budgeting, being transparent, and of course, just having conversations with those around you. Because I feel like you would be surprised by the people who can help you in your situation if you just, open up and have that conversation.
Absolutely. And people, and I know it for myself, but I've also observed it. When people know, particularly for young people, when you see young people have a dream, people will rally behind and raise money for
Mm,
you. And I think a lot of times, we don't want folks in our business. And so we don't tell people, or we think, oh, they're not going to understand or they're not going to support it, but you just never
mm,
know. And so, yeah, I very much appreciate that you said be transparent, tell people, because you never know who might decide to do a fundraiser for
exactly.
you, or maybe purchase it for you. I don't know how expensive things are, so I don't know if that's out of the
Mhm.
question, but you just never know. If people don't know what your goal is, they can't support it. As you know, the thing of it is we we rally for people with everything else, with baby showers, weddings, and things. And we can support, we can, and I do see people do it. We can support other dreams that people
Mhm.
have because this is important too.
It definitely is. I just came across, I believe he was a cellist, that a black cellist from, I believe, Ohio, if I'm remembering that correct, who was trying to afford a cello of his own to take to college, and it started to GoFundMe. I mean, if you really want it, you have to put in the work. You have to go out there and do it. And I see so many young musicians even using their online platform as a way, and they might not have the finances first in their mind, but they're saying, I want to show up. I want to be in everyone's face playing this instrument and show them how much I love this thing. And support comes with that. There's people that will constantly look for you when you do that and look to hire you for different things. So I'm glad people are just putting themselves out there. And you're so correct in saying that people will rally behind something when, especially when they see that you're really passionate about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And was that kind of your inspiration for starting Create?
Wow, Create. I had started it during my undergrad time when I was at Mason Grove School of the Arts, and it came out of many different things. The first thing that comes to mind is when I would sit in class. And at this point, I had been through Juilliard's MAP program. I've been through, regular music education. I've sat in my college classes. And the one thing I felt that was lacking was talking about Black music and the influence that it has had on so many other styles of music, the contributions that we have given the industry, given our communities, um, just from the vibe of the music in itself. It was just something so different. And I
Yeah.
think when I was in college, it was maybe one class, just one class out of my 4 years being there, where we talked about Black music. And it was a very quick conversation.
Really?
Yeah. And I was curious. I was like, maybe I was there for classical music, but I was like, let me talk to the jazz program. And jazz program, of course, they talked about a little bit more because, that is a style that is African American style of music. But still,
Yes.
they also felt that it was lacking. And I began to talk around to all my other friends that go to other music conservatories and universities and things. And it's not just a my school issue. It was a overall worldwide kind of issue that they just weren't talking about it enough. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to create this organization, Create, because I just wanted to have this conversation around Black artistic contributions, whether that be music, dance, theater, filmmaking, anything. I just wanted to have that conversation. And if they don't learn it in class, at least let's learn it here. The other thing was, I felt like I wanted to mingle and network a bit more with some of the Black musicians that are out there, because I was having a conversation with a well known musician that I know that has performed in many different musical venues. And she was saying that it's like a whole other separate networking when you're around other, non-white musicians or non-white actors and things, and you're talking about your experiences and being able to create art with one another. Of course, creating art as a
Mm-hmm.
collective is important anyway, but creating art around our experiences is a total different level of art. And you can relate to that. I mean, every event that happens, music is somehow incorporated or included.
Yes.
And that was the whole point. I wanted some sense of collaboration amongst one another, because
Mhm.
here we are in college. And at the time, of course, we had no clue that COVID was coming, nothing to that extent. But we wanted to have the conversations around our careers, of our fears and things that we didn't quite understand. And in terms of fears, we meant more so just how to jump into this industry. There's, so many older people that have been in the industry for so long that they're the go-to people. And it's like, how do we as young people put ourselves to the forefront to let our voices be heard, to let our music be heard, our art be heard? So we were able to just have those conversations, and it turned into so much more than I expected. I wanted it to be, just like a student, let's get together and chat after class type of thing. Then it started to
Yeah.
grab the attention of like administration. It grabbed the attention of deans, and they were like, "Wow, we need to have a more of a conversation around diversity and talk about how we can help with your experience as an artist." And I will say, my university, they were so willing to help in any way possible. I held my meetings at the art school, and they said, "This is your designated space. You know, you can do whatever you want with this space. You can have your showcases, performances, events. Just do whatever you want right here." And they were just so open to sitting down consistently to have these conversations on what can we do, you know, to help you guys. So that was how Create was born. And now since COVID, it's still kind of getting its footing together because everything was so in person. Everything was so, and arts in general is a very in person kind of thing because you
Person.
collaborate with one another in person. And as a musician during COVID, I was like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I don't know where this is going. I can't even play an instrument with anybody right now. So everything is usually online now for us, and just constantly putting out information, constantly spreading knowledge about things, shouting out all these amazing artists in the world that are doing such great things.
Wow, I am so proud of
Thank
you
you.
for taking that initiative. It's just, that's what we have to do. And that's historically what Black women, that's just what we
Hmm.
do. There's this need, there's this thing. We need to put it out there, and we have to advocate and be our own activists and just really, I mean, I was shocked when you said like there was only the one course, because again, even though I'm not a musician, like I love music, I listen to everything from the Beatles to Cardi B. Like I listen to it all seriously, and I can listen to it all in one day. And so just understanding the influence of Black musicians in country music and rock and
Yes.
just in
Hmm.
everything, and not and hearing that that's not acknowledged. I'm not. It's not surprising, but it is. It's like really, we doing that. So I'm so proud of you for saying that this is a gap, and it's part of that invisibility that contributes to the underrepresentation.
Yes. Hmm. And when I think about the arts, and I'm more so speaking to New York and just the things that I've encountered, I feel
Yeah.
like arts institutions and these larger art structures in these bigger cities have gotten away with a lot to me, um, in
Mhm.
terms of every time, just I've even heard things to the extent of people who look like me saying they don't feel comfortable going to those events because it's just like, I'm so out of place to them that I stick out like a sore thumb kind of thing. And I feel like they've gotten away with a lot in terms of the stage representation for
Yeah.
13%. I think there was a statistic out there about 13% of musicians that are in orchestras being non-white. And of course, the number for Black and African American is just even lower than that. um, I feel like that's in today's day and age, I feel like that's an absolutely ridiculous percentage. I think that a bigger conversation needs to be had. And I often see diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations happen in orchestras, and they cater their conversations around like maybe it's our audition process. Maybe we should just stick with blind auditions so we're just hearing people and not seeing them, and maybe that plays a factor into it. And of course, that may play a factor into it. But to me, I also think all the way back to when I was young and when I was in school, and how many of these school systems have music programs. I feel like these are these huge organizations and institutions that have the ability to go back to these places and help those situations because we all know that that is where it started at. The funding,
Yes.
how about we start some sort of funding to these school systems? How about we go to these school
Mhm.
systems and give some performances and expose these children maybe to things that they haven't seen or heard before? Let's
Mhm.
educate them on careers in the arts. I feel like they're at a point where they're able to do those things and do not currently do them, or do them in areas where it's not as needed as underserved communities. So I definitely understand that. Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, you are so on point because, and I think that's one of the things that's missing a lot in these diversity and inclusion conversations. People only want to address the people who are already there.
Yes.
Like, okay, they're there, they're asking for a seat at the table. What can we do to pull up a chair for them? Well, no, I need you to be putting other people in the pipeline,
Yes.
Because at some point, especially as it relates to the arts, because we know that these programs are being cut just aggressively, and it's an overall school funding issue. But as you noted, these programs, they've got the clout that they can go in and
Hmm.
sponsor something to be able to help or do like special programs and things like that. Is they can do those things, and that way the kids get the exposure and they get the financial support to be able to do these things. And if you're really serious
Yes.
about improving the number of Black and other people of color and minorities in these industries, that's what you'll do.
Absolutely. And
I mean, what is it? The science coding. Like we see that there's a blueprint for it. I mean, that's essentially what they're doing in coding now. They're going to the kids when they're in grade school now and getting them exposed. So they're creating a new pipeline of talent.
yes, I think I just saw the Girls Who Code program. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely
Yes.
amazing. And that is literally a blueprint of what needs to be done in terms of music in the same right. And I feel some sort of way when I look around at all these arts organizations, especially in the city. Being from New York, that's the most exposure that I get a lot. And seeing these organizations that really are doing the work for these school systems, and they're making it happen, and they really don't have much to work with. They really just
Mm-hmm.
coming into these spaces, giving everything that they've got and trying so hard. And I wish that they had more financial funding. I wish that, things were a little bit easier on them, because I know it's so few of them that are out there that are really going to these schools and making these things happen.
Yeah. Where can people like what are some organizations that people could donate to? Like I know, I mean people could, I guess in theory, start scholarship funds or grants for students, but not necessarily to fund an entire art program within a grade school or middle school. But what are some organizations that people should look at, in terms of being able to donate and help support the arts?
Definitely what I usually do is I usually try to go online and see, for example, like the Schomburg in Harlem. That
Hmm.
was an artistic space that I was introduced to as a young kid, and it had such an impact on me. Looking within your community for all the arts program, and it may be hard to find sometimes because these are smaller art organizations. They might not have as much funding to go into advertising like Carnegie Hall might. So you really have to go out there
Yeah.
and have conversations like, talk to a community member whom you know might play music or something like that, and ask them, do you know any type of organizations? Usually, a lot of exposure that I've had to arts organizations came through conversations, because these were not things that just came up on an ad on a website or on Google somewhere. But definitely, the Schomburg is one of them. I definitely think of the MAP program a lot, because they constantly had such a diverse group of artists come in and talk to this cohort of students that they had. And I remember there's a flute group that's called Flutronics. And they're so cool. Like they're two black females that they really do everything between classical flute to electronic flute, and they came in and performed for us. But they're also an example in themselves, because they do educational programming as well. Find black musicians that actually go out there and do these things and support them, because they're definitely using whatever funding you give them to go right back into these students and into these schools.
Okay, excellent. And how do people support Black musicians themselves? Because as you noted, everything has, I mean, people are starting to tour again. And I know that our symphony has resumed here in St. Louis. And so I know that things are starting to happen again. But people also lost, years worth of money from touring and performing and everything. And it still isn't back the way it was. So musicians need a lot of support still. And we really owe them because I'll tell you during COVID, I don't know if you were following like D Nice's concerts. Like he's different, he's a DJ, but still, it's like the
Oh,
music is what got a lot of us through. I mean, Versus
mhm.
started during COVID. Like music really helped get a lot of people
Yeah,
through some dark times when we couldn't all be together. So we owe musicians a lot. So how do people support musicians? Like even our favorite people like you on Instagram. What are things that people can do to help support you all?
I would say one of the best ways, of course, to support artists is through the art that they create. Whether that be a musician, hire them for your event or recommend them to someone that you know is having an event. A lot of artists also sell like arrangements and pieces online. If you're someone that's learning how to play an instrument, check into that, or maybe ask them, do you sell any sheet music for something like this? I know another way to support artists, you know, because we're constantly putting ourselves out there, putting ourselves on social media and all types of things. I definitely say exposure is one of the biggest things, because when you say to someone else, "Oh, this is an artist that I've really been checking out. You should check them out." It's like a trail that follows along, and so many more people are now able to see you and support you. And the whole point, you know, is exposure because we want to be seen, we want to be talked about, and we want to become these household names just like Bach, Beethoven, and Mozart are because we're still, you know, creating music in the same way that they did. We're still gathering audiences in the same way that they did. I also would say if you know an artist that's having any type of online event, usually they might have a donation button that's down at the bottom. You know, send them a couple dollars, send them something that's representative of the emotions that you felt as you watched their performance, that you feel like, you know, this really made my day. And I really just want to send a donation over to this person. But I definitely recommend the exposure part. But I always say with that, I see a lot of situations where, especially within our community, a lot of people think that they can pay you in exposure, and that is two totally different things. Because they'll say, "Oh, we from the same block. You should just pay me because you know it's not the same thing just because there's still financial needs. You can't really ask a musician, oh, can you just play at this thing? It'll be for like an hour, but because I know you, maybe it should be free, and you know a lot of people that'll be there. It's not the same thing at
Yeah,
all. So I
no,
definitely say support the arts, but support it in a way that's realistic in terms of, you might not know all of the expenses that they have, but just like any other business, any other entrepreneur, there's a lot of money, time, and energy that goes into everything that they do.
absolutely. And and I'm so glad that you said that because I think, especially in the social media age, we get so much for free from people. And I think it's only increased
Yes.
over the last year during COVID because for a lot of musicians and artists, that was the only way people they could didn't forget about
Yeah.
them. So people were doing all these virtual concerts and everything, and people have kind of gotten accustomed to it. And it's like, okay, figure out a way that you can support them. I know that like even Erica Badu started doing like these live concerts, and you had to pay $1 to get
Hmm.
in, but you could give more. And I had said to my sister, she was she was laughing at me because I've seen Erica in live about probably 4 or 5 times. Love her. And I said, I had to think about it because the second time I think we had the option to give
Hmm.
more during the show. And I was like, I looked and I was like, yeah, I spent like $70 on that concert last night. But I was over jamming and my sister was like, I thought it was $1 to get in. And I said, well, when I go see her, I'm usually spending 70 or more. And I'm quite sure all that's not going to Erica. So it's like I'm willing to give whoever Ticketmaster $70. And I don't know how much she's getting of it. But right now she's doing this and she probably doesn't necessarily need the money to live herself, but she's got a band
Hmm.
that I'm sure she's trying to also make sure they stay afloat during this
Yeah.
time. So if I can pay Ticketmaster $70, I can pay hers. And then, I don't know if you saw her concerts, but we actually got to vote and pick some of the songs we wanted her to play.
That's
Like
so
she'd give us two
cool.
options and you could vote. It was the coolest thing ever. Like I was over here jamming in my bed because she was, where it could be late. Like I think she's supposed to start at 9. She didn't start till almost
Oh
11
my God.
o'clock. Yes. I had to bring the laptop into bed with me. I was like, I'm waiting. I'd already paid my dollar. I had the link to get in. I was like, if she starts at 1 o'clock, I'm gonna be up at 1 o'clock
Oh,
waiting. And it was well worth it. But I think that we really have to reframe how we view showing our
yeah.
gratitude. Because artists, I mean, like you said, it's a career too. We have to reframe how we view it. Is you wouldn't tell the person who's doing your hair or your makeup, like, come on, you do my hair, my makeup, other people will
Right.
see it and you'll get other work from it. No, that's here their time. They brought things and their training that they had to take so that they would be able to do that. It's the same thing with a
Yeah.
musician. So pay people. Pay them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that conversation around getting a lot of things for free, I've seen a lot of conversations around that for content creators and influencers, usually offering their platform in exchange for a product or something like that. And the product might be
Yeah.
worth like $15, $10. And a lot of content creators feel like that isn't worth the time and the energy that it takes to create something that is a good advertisement for this product. And I think about that a lot when I think about music and the way how many times I've been asked to perform somewhere for completely free just because, and it's not even a circumstance like, oh, this is a nonprofit organization who wants me to perform for something. That's a different situation. It's more so people that are in a position to give that are just like, oh, but it's just the music. But the music is most times what carries the entire event. And it really
Yeah.
it
Oh
sets the
yes.
tone. So, there's a lot that goes into music, and even a musician, just as an example, when you go to perform, it's about the preparation, the times that it takes you to learn all these different pieces, and the time period that you're being asked to play. I've seen people being asked more than 3 hours and not being paid what playing more than 3 hours is, because that's a lot of energy. And it's also picking repertoire that will get everybody hyped. When you just mentioned D Nice, that's what it reminded me of. Like, I think of DJs when they go into these settings and it's like they're reading the room at every minute to
Yeah.
pick repertoire that, keeps everybody going so it never gets dull in there.
Mhm.
And that's they're working every second that you're asking them to work. Like, they're
Yeah.
really putting in all of that. So definitely pay people what they are worth for sure.
Yes. Yeah, and I think it's wonderful because I think it's kind of a generational
Mhm.
thing because for so long, particularly with boomers, it was like, you have to pay your dues and you have to do all these things. And now, you know, millennials and even Gen X is are like, I don't think I'm gonna do that because y'all did that and y'all broke and miserable. Or, you might have money, but you're still
Right,
miserable. I'm not gonna be
right.
miserable. And so I applaud people who are saying, I'm good, because again, it's all about
It is.
transparency. I absolutely understand if people don't have a budget at that point to be able to afford something. But I think that's a point where you're honest with someone and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to achieve. And I don't have any money to pay you right now. And give them the opportunity and respect when they say, hey, come talk to me when you have a little bit more to work
Definitely.
with. But if it's for a good cause or if you're transparent with people, I have found a lot of people will work
They
with you.
will.
It goes back to that
For
transparency.
sure. My mom she often talks about this generation in terms of just being so forward about the way that we feel and not taking any less than what we deserve. I think we come into
Yeah,
situations knowing exactly what we're worth, and this is what I expect. And if it's not that, I will just move on to the next situation. And I definitely applaud everyone around me who's doing that because it is true. You spend a lot of time, especially when it's something it's your career, it's your job, and let's say you're an entrepreneur, it's so much more than 8 hours. I know that much. It's more than 40 hours a week. You're putting in work like
yeah.
24/7. So to be able to manage your time and be this entrepreneur and handle your finances, that's a whole lot that goes into you and your business and what you do.
Yeah.
So the money has to be representative of all that time that you spend.
I'm all here for it. Like, y'all are showing us the way. At first, because I think I'm technically part of Gen X. I was born in 80. But at first, I was like, oh my God, they coming in the door saying, like, y'all gonna pay me this. I'm gonna take a month off for vacation and I'm gonna buy me a $500,000 house by the time I'm 30 and I'm retiring when I'm 35. And we're like, huh, we were tripping. And so it's like, yes, I mean, it is amazing, especially to see all these young Black women doing
Yeah.
this. It's so liberating and refreshing. And I look at it like, this is what our ancestors wanted.
Yes.
Our ancestors wanted to rest.
Yes.
They didn't, and they wouldn't want us to be grinding and hustling. Like people, we glorify the hustle and this, fake it till you make it thing. And it's just, no, people are broke down. And by the time you're able to retire and you're earning something that can keep you comfortable, like you can't fully enjoy it because you spent so much of your life being broke
Mm-hmm.
down physically or emotionally or
Mm-hmm.
mentally. And younger folks are saying, I'm not going to put myself through that.
Absolutely. I often think about, in musical circumstances, I think a lot about the musicians that came before me, and I
Mhm.
think about all that they endured and everything that they went through just to get to the point where they were, and it wasn't even the point that they deserved to be at. And there's even a flutist that often comes to my mind. His name is Blind Tom Wiggins. And he was a flautist who was also a slave at the time, and the slave master had decided to separate his entire family as soon as he was born, and they found out that he had this musical talent. And not only was he blind, but he was also autistic, and he was playing all these pieces, and he didn't have to hear anything more than one time in order to be able to play it. And once they realized his talents, they took him around and toured him, with all these different states and all these different
Mhm.
auctions. And it's crazy because you look at the advertisement poster that they used for him, and it was always something derogative. It was also always something like a circus, like look at this freak show kind of situation. And I
Mhm.
think he had accumulated, he was the highest paid musician ever in the world and had never received a dime of that money, even when him and his family were free, never received a dime of that money. And the family that owns him, still has that money to this day. But I think about his situation very frequently because he deserves so much more than he received. He deserves so much
Mhm.
more recognition than to be called a freak show. And I just think about all the things that he would have done and accomplished if he was in today's time. So when I play, I think back to all these Black musicians who really did not get everything that they deserved, and I'm determined to pay homage to those musicians and always put my best foot forward in honor of those musicians, because we give so much to these industries, we've given so much to communities, even with outside of our community. And yeah, those are things I definitely think about on a daily basis when it comes to music creation.
All I can say is I'm proud of you,
Oh,
and you are doing our ancestors
thank you
proud.
so much.
Absolutely. How can we support you? Where can the audience, first of all, like what's your website, your Instagram handle, and how do we support you and your projects and your business?
Absolutely. So my website is the same as my Instagram. It's www.iamsamalynda.com. And my Instagram, my TikTok is both at IamSANAMALYNDA. And you can definitely support me by constantly sharing the content that I put out. When I created my Black Classic series, I really just wanted to educate those around me and give something uplifting to look forward to every day, because I know we're still in a pandemic. There's still a lot going on every single day, and to be able to give anybody a smile and think back on some musical memories, that really means a lot to me. But yeah, definitely share my content. If you have an event that is coming up, a birthday celebration, wherever you are, I have a form on my website that you can fill out to give more information about your event, and where we can definitely work something out. And I'm gonna bring some Black classics to your event so we can have a good time. But yeah, I would just love to be, shown off as the Black musician that I am, and just shown off for all the knowledge that I bring, because these are conversations that definitely need to be held. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. You girl, you are doing
Thank
it.
you
You're
so
awesome. Thank
much.
you. Thank you. Thank you. What has been your favorite before we close out? So, like, what has been your favorite from the classic songs that you performed?
Ooh, that's a hard one.
I know that's a
That's a
hard one,
really
isn't
hard
it?
one. I,
Because you picked like, oh, some jams. I think I had commented once. I was like, they need to create a twerk emoji because like the dance emoji is not sufficient. Like you need somewhere you could drop it like it's hot. Because I'm like, she killed it on that
thank
one. And then another one, and another one.
I think, oh, I'm really trying to think. I think my favorite was actually one that I recently did. It was Michael Jackson, "Don't Stop Till You Get Enough." That was my absolute favorite because I remember as a kid, like just when you listen to the end of the track, and that's how you know I had like a musical mind as a kid. Because why would a kid pick this out in a song? But it was just the way that song layered all these different instruments as it went on, starting off with the bass, then the percussion came in, and then at the end of the song, they kind of pick each instrument out as the song begins to fade out. And I just, it was something about the instrumentation, and I often wish like I was a fly on the wall in the studio when they were doing that one, because I would have been going absolutely crazy. And it's just a song that wherever I am, I'm gonna dance to that song. Like that's just a song that will definitely get you out
Right.
your seat, whether you feel like dancing or not. You're gonna get up. So
Yeah.
that is one of my favorite songs.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to the next part of that series, and I appreciate you, and I look forward to supporting you and just watching you blossom and just glow up in your career, and just as you really educate and empower people, and you're helping develop that future pipeline of musicians and artists. So thank you for all that you're doing. Thank you for chatting with me
Oh, and thank
today.
you so much for this beautiful platform that you've created, just highlighting all these individuals that have so much to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Y'all have to make sure you are following Miss Sana Colter. She is awesome. So thank you. And this is She Confidential. Until next time.